All right, we will now link up with Eshomo Moimodu and Tijesu Adewiye in our Abuja studio. Good morning, Eshomo. Good morning, Tijesu. I wonder how you're feeling about the hike in tariff for telecoms as it is.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult thing to swallow because even if you consider the service delivery before now, they're not just there. So with this increase, trying to wonder, are they marking up the service delivery so that we'll get better service for whatever we're paying?
Absolutely. TJ, so don't be,
She's a
don't
big
worry.
Girl. She
No, don't worry. Anytime I blip your phone, what we say flash, normally when I blip your phone, because I know
is a big girl. I know she's not feeling it.
No.
Defend yourself.
But at least we have some.
You see?
Okay, let's go to the business of the day. Thanks everyone for joining us on the show. This beautiful Tuesday morning, we are live from our Abuja studio here in the capital city. Now, for decades, Nigeria's power supply challenges have been subject of national debate, but the focus is now shifting to a broader agenda, which is energy transition. And as the world moves towards cleaner and more sustainable energy, Nigeria has unveiled an ambitious plan to tackle power shortage while reducing its reliance on fossil fuels. What does this mean for the country's future? Nigeria's energy transition plan is designed to address two critical challenges: increasing access to electricity for millions of citizens and meeting global commitments to reduce carbon emissions. And the federal government recently announced a roadmap aimed at generating 30% of the nation's electricity from renewable energy sources by 2030. And this includes investment in solar, wind, and hydropower projects, alongside efforts to modernize the nation's grid. Experts agree that these efforts could be transformative if implemented effectively.
Despite this optimism, significant challenges remain. Nigeria's energy sector is plagued by aging infrastructure, gas shortages, and funding constraints. Rural communities, in particular, are often left in darkness due to the high cost of extending the grid to remote areas. To address these issues, the government is partnering with private sector players and international organizations. And while the energy transition plan offers a glimpse of hope, it also underscores the need for consistency and accountability in execution. The big question remains, will Nigeria seize this opportunity to become an energy leader in Africa, or will persistent challenges derail its progress? Our guest today is the Managing Director of Mainstream Energy Solutions Limited, an energy consultant who has been tracking Nigeria's journey towards a brighter and greener future. And together we'll be taking a look at how young entrepreneurs are driving innovation in the renewable energy sector. Thank you, Engineer Lamu Audu, for coming on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Now we'll begin our conversation with the recent decision by, the newly sworn-in President of the United States, Donald Trump, to pull America out of the Paris Climate Treaty. But before we begin our conversation, let's take a listen.
And the next item, sir, is a letter that will be transmitted to the United Nations explaining that we are withdrawing from the Paris Climate Treaty. The next item here is the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty.
All right, let's just begin. This decision by the newly sworn-in president will change the whole world climate action. But do you think this will also directly impact on Nigeria's LNG transition plan?
Absolutely so. Just a bit of background. The Paris Treaty, but actually is the Paris Climate Change Treaty, which was signed in 2016. By about 193 countries, is expected to follow up on a mechanism which was agreed upon to mitigate and finance climate change effects.
Okay.
This is more so on the global industrial nations, who I would say are the culprits in emitting carbon, from the process of industrialization into the atmosphere, which is the main cause of the climate change, as we call it. Now, the Paris Treaty is expected to see a process where these industrial nations are supposed to reduce their carbon emission, and that's the reduction, and then a mitigation and adaptation. Adaptation, that is, as you move away from the use of fossil fuel, which is the main cause of the carbon emission, is supposed to put in place something that will replace the one that you are moving away from, so that it becomes sustainable. But at the same time, there has to be some financing to back that up. Financing to mitigate and adopt in your home country, as well as encouraging investment in the renewable or green source of energy. That is what the Paris Treaty is in place for. Now, the current U.S. president, who just got sworn in yesterday, has in his first term actually threatened to pull out the U.S. from the treaty. He wasn't able to formally do that until yesterday. His own point of view is that it will impact on U.S. industrialization, processes, because of the heavy reliance on fossil fuel.
Okay.
So if you now comply with the Paris Treaty, means that your production level will drop. It will impact his economy. That is number one. Secondly, there has to be some financing in place for the adaptation, and also the provision for financing, the other sources of energy, hydro, for example, or the renewables generally, which hydro is part of. So the U.S. president is seeing that if he follows through with that, that was why he was talking about he will save so much.
Okay.
Yes. So the intent is actually to see that whatever action he is going to take will not have negative impact on U.S. economy, through the production and I would say productivity of their industries.
But for us here in Africa and Nigeria specifically, how would we cope? Because U.S. is the biggest financier. And if it's pulling out, which means the fund that's supposed to be meant, we have huge deposit of hydrocarbon, for instance. Yes. So if we're moving from that into renewable energies, which means the fund for us to develop that sector will not be available. So if you place that side by side the energy transition plan of the federal government, how can we survive?
Okay, first of all, thank you for that question. There are two negative consequences of his actions. One is global. Let me deal with that before coming to your question, how it impacts on Nigeria as a net exporter of, crude oil. Now, globally, if the U.S. moves out of the Paris Treaty, and considering the fact that the U.S. is a major emitter of carbon, which is the main cause of the climate change that is affecting everyone now, including the U.S. So many of their dams are drying up because of the climate change effect. Now, definitely that action will impact everybody else, including Nigeria. Unfortunately for us, we are not in a position to adapt easily. unlike the developed countries that have mechanisms to be able to mitigate and and adopt as a policy, to move away from that energy source. Now, it definitely will impact on us. For example, Mainstream Energy Solutions Limited is the operator of Kainji, Jeba, and Zungeru hydropower plants. We are the biggest privately owned hydropower plant in Africa. We rely on water. We rely on rainfall, for the hydrology to run the plants. The impact of the climate change is something that really will have a serious negative effect on our operations, and globally so, to the extent that we now have to put in place measures to be able to mitigate, because you either have too much rainfall, which will cause flooding, which will threaten the safety of your dams and all the riparian communities with the environmental impact and all that, or you have little rainfall, which means that you will not have enough water in your reservoir to be able to operate your machines. So it has all this negative impact. Now, coming to the issue of Nigeria not being able to export, definitely this is something that the government has to quickly look at to see, one, because I want to believe, which is so, that U.S. is one of our major importers, of our crude. Yeah. Yes. If you look at it in that respect, that is based on the decision by the U.S. president, it is going to impact on us positively in that respect, because that means they will continue to utilize our products. So that will not have any negative effect on us. The only negative effect is the climate change impact, which will seriously, and is already affecting everybody. This is where the government has to now come in to see how they can align the energy transition, because of the climate change adaptation that has to be put in place. So the energy transition, that master plan that the government is looking at, is very timely. Very, very timely, because that will now be able to cushion the effect of the climate change. Where, God forbid, even if our rivers dry up, by the time you move to solar, for example, you'll be able to cushion the effect of not being able to generate enough energy from your hydro plants.
Well, this transition plan is quite ambitious. It's expected to cost at least $10 billion on a yearly basis, but yes, implementation is quite slow. Why is this? Is this due to funding, or lack of lack of capacity, or poor political will?
Before now, it has been an issue of lack of funding, targeted funding. But with what we are seeing now with this current government, with the commitment we are seeing, I think funding will not be an issue, because the government is working with other international financing agencies, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and all their financing. Because the issue of not having financing is not because the finance is not there, but having the right environment to be able to attract that funding. So what the government currently is doing is in the right direction. That's why we are now beginning to see inflow of funding. For example, now there's a plan in process, which has, in fact, the process has already begun, where the distribution companies are expected to generate a certain quantum of energy through solar within their area of jurisdiction, which is going to be an off-grid solution because of the weak grid we have. So it's really a huge intervention that we are going to see. And the World Bank and its partners are deeply involved in this. And I can tell you, so long as the government creates the enabling environment for investors, you will see funds coming not necessarily from the international development agencies, but from private investors as well. that will definitely come in. For example, I give you an example of what we are doing in mainstream. Hydropower generation is actually an enabler of solar generation. Why am I saying this is that you can use the solar and the hydro to work as hybrid. Okay. Yes. We use water to run our machines. Now, what will happen is that if you have a solar farm around your asset, and solar is a variable renewable energy, it works only in daytime. And if you are expecting to have 24-hour power supply from solar, it means you have to have a storage battery. But if you have a hydro plant, you don't need that battery again. It is the hydro that will serve as your battery. What will happen is that in the daytime, you generate through the solar and transmit it through the system. You can now conserve that quantum of, for example, if you generate 200 megawatt of solar during the daytime, you can conserve 200 megawatt quantum of water, which you would have used to generate through the turbines, and use it during the night.
Yeah, I like the analysis, but let's look at in practice. You just talked about the distribution companies being mandated to also have solar within their areas of operation. We also have a lot of these dams that are in place. But in practice, can we set a time frame when renewable energy should be able to get to a certain level of helping us to get out of this what looks like a cyclical, like a circle of national grid collapse, inefficient power supply, and all that? Can we set a timeline?
Yes, the issue of grid collapse, is a very complex matter because a lot of things come into play. That aside, the government has set for itself a target for getting up to 30% of the energy that will be generated in Nigeria coming from renewables, which is a very, very huge ambition that they are looking at 2030, in the short term, and then there's a medium and long term. What is important is to have a policy and the commitment in place. And as I've said earlier, we are now beginning to see some finance inflow, some investment inflow into the country in that direction. So I'm very optimistic that with the policies in place, even for the hydro generation, you've mentioned there are a number of dams around, and we have the potential to generate huge quantum of hydropower, which is the most sustainable source of renewable known by mankind. The government has put in place now a mechanism where any investor that wants to invest in the hydro scheme, hydro ecosystem, will have a one-stop shop to deal with. In the past, if you want to invest in the hydro business, you have to deal with Ministry of Water Resources, you have to deal with Ministry of Power, you have to deal with ICRC, all those individually. You don't have one-stop shop where you can go and deal with them as a committee. But you can see late last year, the government made decide that the Ministry of Power and Ministry of Water Resources signed an MOU to allow them have a common platform where they can engage investors. Yes, this is already sending very large positive signal in the global hydropower investment community, because people are now saying this is the time to come to Nigeria because the resources are there, untapped. Currently, we have up to 14,000 megawatt of untapped hydro potential in Nigeria. Yes, and many more will come on stream as we continue with the investigations. But currently, it is on record that we have an untapped, that is excluding the Kainjis and the Jebas and all the rest, untapped, not built. So, and we've been talking about having just about 5,000 megawatt on the grid. Just imagine if we can harness that 14,000, which is a sustainable source of energy. Yes.
With what you're saying, are you saying that Nigeria lacks a holistic time frame, are you saying that Nigeria lacks a holistic policy and implementation framework?
That was then. Just like I said now, late last year, the government decided to really focus on having a robust...
Can you just hold your thoughts there? Let's quickly go on a commercial break. We'll be right back.
Glad to have you back. We're still talking with engineer Audu Lamu, and we have been discussing Nigeria's energy transition. Well, this plan is quite ambitious, and it plans to contribute to economic growth by job creation and poverty alleviation. Available data shows that renewable energy in Nigeria will lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty and create over 340,000 jobs by 2030 and 840,000 jobs by 2060. Now, the 2030 target is just 5 years away. Is this achievable?
It's actually a very ambitious plan, but it's better to have an ambitious or even over-ambitious program than not to have at all. Nigeria has been lagging behind in achieving its sustainable goals. Why? Because we don't have enough energy to drive that, plan. The quantum of people that will be moved out of poverty or the economic development of any nation is directly proportional, I can tell you, to the quantum of energy they generate, transmit, and use. So I think this is exactly what the government have seen, that they have to face this issue of lack of sustainable, reliable energy to be able to move people out of poverty. And the issue of poverty is really staring at all of us in the eyes, because this has impact on insecurity that is bedeviling the nation today, the out-of-street kids all over the place. And you can see, I think globally, about 70, even more than 70% of Nigerians are living below the poverty line, which is very unfortunate. So the only way to take the nation out of that quagmire is to have enough energy, where the government does not even talk about employment or job creation. People can be, self-employed. Nigerians are very creative. I can tell you, if you provide power even to the people in the village, in the rural areas, that explains what I said earlier about the discourse providing off-grid solution in their, area of jurisdiction. Because even the people in rural areas need power. Exactly. The farmers need power, the fishermen need power, the tailor, everybody. And you will also be able to manage the rural-urban migration that we see every day, where people are trooping out of the villages, coming to the cities, because that is where life is. If you provide power, people will stay where they are. Not these people that are coming to the city, I don't think they really wish to. It's because of the situation they find themselves. Okay. Yes. So currently, I wouldn't say it is over-ambitious. It is the right decision in the right direction to be able to, because we have enough resources. We have all that it takes to be able to achieve this goal. In terms of what? Manpower. We have the required manpower in this country to be able to drive this. We have the resources. We have the solar. We have sun in abundance.
Well, Nigeria has borrowed over $3.23 billion in the last 4 years to solve its energy challenge, and it's still yet to produce more than 4,500 megawatts of electricity to service its 200 million population. But we still see, frequent power outages. We have had 12 national grid collapse in just 2024 alone. What has been achieved in the partnership with big energy corporations and, developed economies?
It is very unfortunate that we are still talking about grid collapse at this moment as a nation. But that's how we find ourselves anyway. But if you look at it, the issue of grid collapse is, people need to understand the power value chain itself for you to appreciate what happens. The government tried to manage it in different ways by having the Siemens contract, having partnership with some of the manufacturers, global manufacturers in it. But the power sector is such that it's not because you spend so much millions of dollars or euro today, tomorrow you get power on the grid. It doesn't happen that way. There has to be time of gestation. You have to, in fact, all the equipments are not off shelf. Well, you have to order them before you begin to ship. You have to design. So it takes some time for you to be able to see the actual impact of what the government has been doing in recent time. The issue of grid collapse, because of the value chain, you have the generation, transmission, and distribution value chain. And whatever happens at any of these value chains impact in whole, yes, it affects. So,
well, unfortunately, we have to leave this conversation here because we've run out of time, but we would invite you some other time to continue the conversation, because obviously there's a lot to talk about in the renewable energy world. But we would thank you very especially for joining us today on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's it from us in Abuja. We deeply apologize for our technical